Cheap, off-the-shelf audio interfaces promise studio quality for pennies, but most of them turn into a headache when the latency spikes or the preamps sound thin after a few sessions. I've seen too many friends spend a weekend setting up a bargain box, only to dump it because the recordings never felt right. That's why I wanted to see whether the Apollo X6 feels like a smarter buy for anyone serious about their sound. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you're standing in front of a rack and wondering if you should splurge or keep it cheap, the fear isn't just about the price tag, it's about the time you'll waste troubleshooting, the tracks you'll have to re-record, and the chance you'll miss a deadline because your interface can't keep up. The Apollo X6 sits in that middle ground where the cost is high enough to raise eyebrows but low enough to be a serious contender for a professional-grade setup. It isn't a toy, it's a piece of hardware that tries to bridge the gap between a hobbyist's desktop and a commercial studio's main console. First, let's talk about what makes this category tricky. A good audio interface needs to be transparent, low latency, and flexible enough to work with the DAWs you already own. At the same time, you want some onboard processing power so you can run plugins without overloading your computer's CPU. Most entry-level units give you a couple of line inputs and basic monitoring, but they leave you wishing for more when you try to track a full band or run classic analog emulations in real time. The X6 connects via Thunderbolt 3, which means you're looking at roughly a 40 gigabits per second pipeline, more than enough to shove 24-bit 192 kHz audio in and out without choking. In practice, I've plugged the unit into a late 2019 MacBook Pro and never saw a single hiccup, even when I was simultaneously sending 4 tracks to a UAD compressor, a tape saturation plugin, and a reverb while monitoring the mix in Pro Tools. The Thunderbolt link also carries power, so you can keep the rack tidy without a separate power brick for the interface itself. What really sets the Apollo line apart is the onboard HEXA core processing. This is a dedicated DSP engine that lets you run UAD's renowned plugins at near-zero latency. For a real-world scenario, imagine you're tracking a vocalist and you want the classic Neve 1073 character on the fly. With the HEXA core, you engage the Unison-enabled preamp emulation and the singer hears the exact same tone they'll get on the final mix, no audible delay, no extra CPU drain on the laptop. That kind of instant, high-quality processing is where the X6 starts to feel like a professional tool rather than just an I/O box. Speaking of Unison, the X6 ships with 2 Unison-enabled MIC line preamps. The magic here is that the preamp doesn't just add a tonal flavor, it actually replicates the impedance, gain structure, and even the transformer saturation of the hardware model you choose. I tested the API 512 and the Manley reference preamps on a drum overhead pair, and the resulting tracks had the same punch and depth you'd expect from those vintage units, without having to buy the actual hardware. The downside is that you only get 2 of these premium preamps, so if you need 4 MIC inputs with that level of emulation, you'll have to add an external preamp or a different interface. Universal Audio bundles its own DAW, Luna, with the X6, and the integration is deeper than most included software deals. Luna talks directly to the Apollo hardware, letting you drag and drop UAD plugins onto any track and have them run on the HEXA core automatically. For a composer who already works in Logic or Pro Tools, Luna can feel like a nice side project environment, but the real benefit is the seamless workflow. You can start a session in your preferred DAW, switch to Luna for tracking with Unison preamps, then bounce back without ever having to reroute your audio. The learning curve is a bit steep if you've never used a DAW that talks so intimately with its interface, but once you get the hang of the routing matrix, it saves a lot of time. Another feature that often gets overlooked is the surround monitor controller. The X6 can handle up to a 5.1 speaker setup, which is a big win for anyone mixing film, games, or immersive music. I set up a modest home theater rig with 2 front, 2 rear, a center, and a sub, and the Apollo let me switch between stereo and full surround with a single knob while still keeping my UAD processing active. It's not a replacement for a dedicated surround console, but for a project studio that needs occasional surround work, it's a practical inclusion. Now, who should actually consider buying this? If you're a serious home recording musician, a freelance engineer, or a small post-production shop that needs real-time analog emulation without maxing out a laptop CPU, the X6 is a compelling middle ground. Its DSP, Unison preamps, and Thunderbolt speed make it a